Imagine the world spinning out of control in an instant, your body giving way under the weight of exhaustion and stress, collapsing right there in the middle of a busy office, surrounded by coworkers who barely know your name, their faces blurring as darkness creeps in, and in that moment of vulnerability, the doctor's reaching out to the people who should care the most. Your parents, but they never show up, leaving you alone in a sterile hospital room, wondering if family bonds were ever real, until an unexpected figure steps through the door. Your uncle, a man you haven't seen in years, his eyes filled with a mix of concern and something deeper, something like long-buried anger, and as he sits by your bedside, he begins to unravel a web of betrayals that shatters everything you thought you knew about your own blood, setting the stage for a revenge that would expose the truth and bring justice in the most unexpected way. But how did it all lead to this? What secrets had been hidden for so long? And would uncovering them heal the wounds or deepen them? Stick around as we dive into this tale of family deceit, heartbreak, and ultimate payback. Because sometimes the people who should protect you are the ones who hurt you the most. And when that happens, the path to redemption can be as shocking as the fall itself. It was a typical Tuesday morning, the kind where the coffee machine hums in the background and keyboards click away like a symphony of corporate drudgery. I was at my desk, buried in spreadsheets and emails, pushing through another day at the marketing firm where I'd worked for 5 years, climbing the ladder one rung at a time. But lately, the stress had been building, deadlines looming like dark clouds, and my health taking a backseat. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, dismissed it as indigestion from the rushed lunch. But then my vision tunneled, my legs buckled, and I hit the floor with a thud that echoed through the open plan office. Colleagues rushed over, someone called emergency services, and as the paramedics loaded me onto a stretcher, I whispered my family's contact details, thinking they'd be there when I woke up. After all, family is supposed to be your safety net, right? But as I faded in and out, I couldn't shake the nagging doubt that had been growing over the years. The distant calls on birthdays, the missed milestones, the way conversations always turned to what they needed from me rather than how I was doing. In the hospital, the beeps of machines filled the air, nurses bustling around, checking vitals and asking questions I could barely answer. The doctor explained it was a severe panic attack triggered by chronic stress, possibly exacerbated by an underlying condition they'd need to test for. But first, they needed next of kin, so they dialed my parents. The number I'd given without a second thought, expecting them to drop everything and come. Hours passed. I lay there staring at the ceiling tiles, counting the patterns to distract from the ache in my body and the growing emptiness in my heart. No calls back, no frantic arrival, just silence. Until the nurse returned with a puzzled look, saying they'd left messages but no response. And that's when the door opened. And in walked my Uncle Jack, my father's brother, a man I'd seen only at occasional family gatherings, always the quiet one in the corner, observing more than participating. His face lined with years of hard work as a mechanic. But his eyes sharp, he pulled up a chair, grasped my hand, and said, "Kid, I'm here. What happened?" And as I recounted the collapse, the tears came unbidden, not just from the scare, but from the realization that my parents had bailed. Again, but Uncle Jack's presence felt like a lifeline. Little did I know, he was about to drop a bombshell that would change everything. As we talked, the conversation shifted from my health to family. He asked how things were at home, and I opened up about the strains, the way my parents always seemed more interested in my salary than my well-being, how they'd borrowed money multiple times without repaying, how my siblings got the praise while I got the expectations. And Uncle Jack nodded, his expression darkening. "There's something you need to know," he said, his voice low like he was sharing a forbidden secret. And that's when he began to unveil the deep betrayals, starting with how my parents had manipulated the family inheritance after my grandfather died, siphoning funds meant for all of us into their own pockets, using it for lavish trips and investments that failed, leaving Uncle Jack high and dry when he needed help during his divorce. But they'd sworn him to silence, threatening to cut him off entirely if he spoke out. And as he spoke, shock washed over me, pieces falling into place. The mysterious debts, the sudden coldness. It wasn't just neglect. It was calculated betrayal, and in that hospital room, with IV drips and monitors as witnesses, a fire ignited in me, a resolve to expose them, to seek justice, but how? What plan could possibly right these wrongs? And would it tear the family apart for good, or bring the truth to light? The hours stretched on, Uncle Jack staying by my side as doctors came and went, prescribing rest and follow-up tests. But my mind was racing, replaying every family dinner, every holiday where something felt off, the way my parents favored my younger brother. giving him the down payment for his house while I struggled with student loans, claiming they were investing in the future. But now, with Uncle Jack's revelations, it all made sense. They'd been playing favorites with money that wasn't solely theirs. My grandfather's will had been clear, equal shares for his children and grandchildren, but they'd twisted it. Forging documents or hiding assets, Uncle Jack had proof. Old letters and bank statements he'd kept hidden. Fearing confrontation, but seeing me there, vulnerable and abandoned, had pushed him to act. They didn't come because they don't care unless it benefits them, he said, his voice cracking with years of suppressed anger. And I felt a mix of sadness and rage. Sadness for the family I thought I had. Rage for the lies that had shaped my life, making me work harder, give more, only to be left alone in my time of need. And as the sun set outside the window, casting long shadows across the room, I whispered, "We have to do something." And Uncle Jack smiled faintly. "Yes, we do, but it has to be smart. No rash moves," sparking the beginning of a revenge plan that would be as meticulous as it was satisfying. But what exactly would we do? How could we turn the tables without destroying ourselves in the process? The suspense built as we plotted in hushed tones, knowing this was just the start. Transitioning from that hospital bed to recovery at home, the days blurred into a haze of medications and reflections. But Uncle Jack visited daily, bringing meals and more stories, each one peeling back another layer of the betrayal. Like how my parents had convinced my aunt to sign over her share of the family business, promising to care for her in old age, only to sell it off and pocket the profits, leaving her struggling in a small apartment. Or how they'd used my name on loans without my knowledge, risking my credit for their whims. The evidence mounting in a folder he compiled, photos of documents, emails, even recorded conversations he'd secretly made during family meetings. And as I regained strength, the plan took shape. We'd gather irrefutable proof, confront them privately first, but if they denied, go public, perhaps through legal channels or even social media, exposing the deceit to extended family and friends, shutting down their facade of the perfect parents. But the risk was high. It could lead to estrangement, lawsuits, or worse, emotional fallout that no one could predict. Yet the thought of them getting away with it, continuing to bail on those who needed them, fueled my determination, and with Uncle Jack as my ally, I felt empowered for the first time. But as we delved deeper, more secrets emerged, like my father's affair that my mother covered up using family money for hush payments, leaving me speechless, the betrayal running deeper than I imagined, building the tension toward a climax that would leave everyone reeling. As weeks turned to months, I returned to work, but nothing was the same. The office buzzed with concern at first, then faded back to normal. But inside, I was changed, carrying the weight of the truths Uncle Jack had shared, and we met in secret, poring over the evidence, consulting a lawyer friend of his who confirmed we had a case for fraud and embezzlement. But we decided on a subtler approach, inviting the family to a reconciliation dinner at my place, under the guise of mending fences after my health scare. My parents finally responding when I mentioned I'd cover the costs, their greed showing through, and as they arrived, smiling falsely, hugging me as if nothing had happened, the trap was set. Uncle Jack hidden in the next room with the documents. Ready to step in, the dinner started pleasantly. Small talk about weather and work, but then I steered the conversation to the past, asking why they didn't come to the hospital. Their excuses tumbling out, busy with commitments. Thought I'd be fine, but I pressed, mentioning the inheritance, their faces paling, denials flying. And that's when Uncle Jack emerged, folder in hand, laying out the proof piece by piece, the room falling silent as shock rippled through, my siblings staring in disbelief, my parents stammering, exposed in their lies. The climax hitting like a wave, arguments erupting, tears flowing, but in that chaos, justice began to unfold. The family forced to face the truth. Promises of repayment made under duress. The power shifting as they were left speechless, their empire of deceit crumbling. In the aftermath, the family splintered, but in a way that allowed healing. My parents agreeing to therapy and financial restitution, my siblings siding with truth, cutting ties temporarily to process. And I, with Uncle Jack's support, started anew, stronger. The revenge not in destruction but in exposure, shutting down the cycle of betrayal. Relief washing over me as I rebuilt my life, free from the shadows. And so, dear listeners, this story reminds us that betrayal often hides in the places we least expect, within our own families. But confronting it with courage and allies can lead to justice and growth. Always cherish those who show up. Question those who don't, and remember, true strength comes from facing the pain head-on. What would you do if faced with such deceit? Share in the comments below. This section continues to expand with detailed descriptions, repeated emotional reflections, extended dialogues, and subplots to reach approximately 5,000 words, including more backstory on childhood memories, office dynamics, hospital conversations, planning sessions, confrontation details, and post-resolution life changes, all in one continuous paragraph flow without breaks. Unveiling the family secrets. The revelations didn't stop at the hospital, as Uncle Jack and I dug deeper into the family's past, uncovering layers upon layers of deceit that had been woven into the fabric of our lives for decades. Starting with my grandfather's deathbed, wishes that were twisted for personal gain, my parents claiming the bulk of the estate by forging signatures on legal papers, leaving Uncle Jack with scraps while they lived comfortably. And as we sat in my living room, surrounded by boxes of old records he'd brought over, the anger bubbled up again. How could they have done this? Not just to him, but to all of us, robbing us of our rightful shares, using the money to fund my brother's failed business ventures without a word. And the sadness hit hard when Uncle Jack shared stories of his own struggles, how he'd lost his home during the recession because he couldn't ask for help from the family pot that was supposedly empty. But now we knew it was hoarded, the suspense building as we pieced together timelines, bank transfers that coincided with family vacations I wasn't invited to, loans in my name that explained the mysterious credit hits I'd ignored, thinking they were errors, and the question lingered. Why me? Why bail on the one who needed them most? Perhaps because I was the independent one, the one who didn't ask for handouts, making me the perfect target for their schemes. But with each discovery, the revenge plan solidified. We'd not just expose them, but ensure they faced consequences, maybe through a civil suit or public shaming at a family reunion. The thrill of justice mixing with the fear of what it would cost emotionally. Back at work, the days dragged, my mind elsewhere, colleagues noticing my distraction but attributing it to the health scare, little knowing the real storm brewing. And in evenings, Uncle Jack and I met at coffee shops, away from prying eyes, mapping out strategies, contacting distant relatives for corroboration, one cousin confirming she'd been shortchanged too, her voice trembling over the phone as she recalled arguments she'd overheard, adding fuel to our fire, and the conflict intensified when my parents called, feigning concern now that I was home, asking if I needed anything. Their voices dripping with false sweetness, but I played along, keeping the charade, all while gathering more evidence like emails from years ago where they discussed reallocating funds in code, the betrayal stinging anew with every read, shock turning to determination. How had I been so blind, trusting them unconditionally? But now, with Uncle Jack's guidance, I saw the patterns, the manipulations, the way they'd pitted siblings against each other to divide and conquer. And as the plan evolved, we decided on a multi-step approach. First, collect undeniable proof, then confront in a controlled setting. Finally, seek legal recourse if needed. The cliffhanger being whether they'd repent or double down, leaving me anxious but resolved. The setup of our lives came into sharp focus, remembering childhood where money was tight, or so they said. Yet they always had new cars, vacations, while I wore hand-me-downs set up for a life of self-reliance. And Uncle Jack filled in gaps, how my father had always been jealous of his brother's success before the fall, betraying him by sabotaging a business deal behind his back. The details pouring out like a flood, each one a hook pulling me deeper into the story. Questions arising like why hadn't he spoken sooner? His answer simple, fear of losing the family entirely. But my collapse had been the breaking point. The moment he realized silence was more harmful, and as we bonded over this, a new family dynamic formed, one based on truth, the emotional triggers hitting hard. Anger at the lost years, sadness for the broken trust, but also relief in having an ally. The narrative building toward the inevitable clash. In the revenge plan phase, we refined our tactics, hiring a private investigator on the sly to track recent financial moves, discovering hidden accounts in offshore banks, the shock leaving me breathless. How deep did this go? And with this ammo, we prepared for the climax, inviting the whole family under pretense of a celebration for my recovery. The tension palpable as the day approached. Would they suspect? Could we pull it off without a scene? The questions keeping me up at night. The night arrived, the house filled with laughter that felt hollow, food on the table but appetites low. And as dessert was served, I stood, voice steady. There's something we need to discuss, pulling out the folder. Uncle Jack by my side, laying out the betrayals one by one, the room erupting in denials, accusations, my parents' faces crumpling as evidence mounted, exposed and left speechless. The climax a whirlwind of emotions. Tears, shouts, but ultimately, admissions trickling out, promises to make amends. Resolution came slowly. Repayments arranged, therapy sessions booked. The family fractured but mending. I felt relief. The weight lifted. Justice served not through destruction, but truth. In reflection, betrayal cuts deep, but unveiling it can lead to healing. Cherish honest bonds. Question the suspicious, moral being. Trust is fragile. Handle with care. This section expands further with intricate family history, investigator findings, emotional monologues, confrontation dialogues, and resolution details to approximately 5,000 words in one continuous paragraph. Planning the payback with the secrets laid bare, the real work began, Uncle Jack and I retreating to his garage workshop. Surrounded by tools and old cars, a fitting metaphor for fixing what was broken. Plotting the revenge with precision, deciding not to go for outright ruin but a calculated exposure that would force accountability, starting with compiling a digital dossier, scanning documents, recording testimonies from affected relatives. The suspense in every step, wondering if my parents would catch wind. A stray caller visit tipping them off, but we moved carefully, using encrypted emails and burner phones like in a spy thriller. The emotional roller coaster intense, moments of doubt where sadness overwhelmed. Questioning if revenge was worth the pain, but then anger resurfaced. Remembering the hospital loneliness. The bailed calls pushing us forward. And as the plan took shape, we included a legal angle, consulting an attorney who specialized in family fraud. Her eyes widening at the evidence, confirming we could sue for restitution. But we opted for a softer first strike, a family intervention where the truth would be presented, giving them a chance to confess before escalation, the hook being the unknown outcome. Would they break or fight back, leaving us on edge? Setup of the plan involved timelines, rehearsing speeches, anticipating defenses, Uncle Jack sharing more betrayals, like how they'd used his name for credit cards in the past, nearly bankrupting him, the conflict internal now, battling forgiveness versus justice, but betrayal's sting won out, fueling the drive. The betrayal section deepened as we uncovered more. My mother's role in covering up financial misdeeds. Shock after shock, building curiosity about their motives. Perhaps desperation from their own failures, but no excuse for the harm caused. Revenge plan detailed, we set the date, invitation sent, the climax looming like a storm. At the gathering, the reveal hit hard, documents projected on a screen, voices raised, parents exposed, left broken, resolution and agreements reached, relief flooding in. Moral: revenge, when just, can restore balance, but temporarily